A down-on-his-luck janitor inherits a crumbling old theater. Everyone laughs, calling it a worthless money pit. But when he stumbles upon a dusty hidden vault, experts are stunned by what's inside, and it changes his life forever. Stick around. This story will make you believe in second chances. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss where this journey leads. The inheritance nobody wanted. The rain fell in heavy sheets over Brackenville, Ohio, turning the cracked sidewalks into shallow rivers. Ethan Cole pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he trudged past the flickering neon sign of Lou's Diner, its glow barely cutting through the gloom. The town had seen better days. Storefronts stood empty, their windows covered in yellow newspapers, and the only sounds were the distant hum of highway traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Ethan wasn't a man who stood out. At 38, he had spent the last 15 years pushing a mop down the halls of Brackenville High. His head down, his life small and predictable. The kids barely noticed him. The teachers nodded politely but never asked about his weekend. He was part of the scenery, just another ghost in a town full of them, which was why the letter had been such a shock. To Ethan Cole, the sole heir of the estate of Arthur W. Cole, including all properties and possessions therein. The lawyer's office had been uncomfortably warm, the air thick with the scent of old paper and lemon polish. The attorney, a sharp-eyed man in a too-tight suit, slid the paperwork across the desk with a sigh, as if he pitied Ethan for what he was about to receive. The Orpheum Grand Theater, the lawyer said. It's yours now. Ethan had blinked. The what? The Orpheum had been a jewel once, a gilded palace of velvet seats and crystal chandeliers, where traveling orchestras and vaudeville acts had drawn crowds from 3 counties over. But that was decades ago. Now, it was a crumbling relic, its marquee letters long gone, its roof sagging under years of neglect. When the news got out, the laughter started almost immediately. Ethan Cole owned the Orpheum? Vince Kowalski, a slick real estate developer with a habit of buying up dying properties for pennies, had smirked into his coffee at the diner. Good luck with that. Place is a death trap. Even the guys at the high school, the ones who barely spoke to him, chuckled as they passed him in the hall. Hey, Ethan, you're going to be a big shot theater mogul now. He ignored them. He was used to ignoring things. But then he stood in front of the Orpheum for the first time as its owner, the weight of the rusted keys in his palm, and something stirred in his chest. The boarded-up windows, the peeling paint, the faint smell of mildew. It should have repelled him. Instead, he felt a strange, stubborn pull. The front doors groaned in protest as he forced them open. Dust swirled in the dim light, filtering through broken stained glass. The lobby floor creaked ominously under his feet, the faded grandeur still visible beneath the grime. A moth-eaten curtain swayed in the draft, revealing the cavernous auditorium beyond. Ethan stepped inside, his boots crunching on plastered debris. The stage, once grand enough for touring operas, was now a graveyard of broken props and rotting wood. But then his foot hit something solid, a trapdoor, hidden beneath a tattered rug. Its iron ring was nearly rusted shut. He yanked hard, muscles straining, until it gave way with a groan. A set of narrow stairs descended into darkness. The air from below was cold and damp, carrying the scent of wet stone and something else, something metallic like old coins. His flashlight flickered as he took the first step down. At the bottom, a rusted metal door stood slightly ajar. Behind it, the faint gleam of something gold caught his eye. Ethan's breath hitched. Then a noise above him, a creak of floorboards. Someone else was in the theater's dark secret. Ethan froze, his fingers tightening around the flashlight. The sound had come from the lobby. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the creaking floorboards above him. His pulse hammered in his throat. No one should have been in the theater. The doors had been locked. Hadn't they? He clicked off the flashlight and held his breath, listening. The footsteps paused. Then a voice, gruff, impatient. Cole? You in here? Ethan recognized that voice. Vince Kowalski. Of course it was him. Vince had been sniffing around the Orpheum for years. Tried to buy it from Ethan's uncle before the old man passed. Now that the theater was Ethan's, Vince had made it clear he still wanted it. and he wasn't above playing dirty to get it. Ethan stayed silent, pressing himself against the damp basement wall. The last thing he needed was Vince knowing about the hidden door. Upstairs, Vince sighed loudly. Guess the idiot's not here. Another voice, deeper, rougher, mumbled something Ethan couldn't make out. Then the footsteps retreated, fading back toward the lobby. Ethan waited another full minute before flicking the flashlight back on. His hand shook slightly as he turned back to the metal door. The gold glint he'd spotted earlier was still there, just beyond the rusted hinges. He pushed the door open the rest of the way, wincing as it screeched in protest. The room beyond was small, no bigger than a closet, lined with wooden shelves sagging under the weight of dust-covered boxes and crates. But it was a safe in the corner that caught his eye, an old cast-iron monstrosity, its surface pitted with rust but still solid. And on its door, barely visible beneath the grime, was an engraving, property of the Orpheum Grand. 1917. Ethan exhaled sharply. 1917, the same year his uncle had always said the theater's real history began. He'd rambled about it sometimes when he'd had too much to drink, whispered stories about secret patrons, midnight shipments, and things being hidden where no one would think to look. Ethan had always assumed it was just the booze talking. Now he wasn't so sure. He wiped the safe dial clean, fingers brushing away decades of dust. The combination lock was stiff, but it turned. He tried a few obvious numbers, his uncle's birthday, the theater's opening year, but nothing clicked. Then, on a whim, he spun the dial to 19-17-23. A heavy clunk echoed through the small room. The safe door creaked open. Inside, nestled atop a stack of yellowed papers, was a small leather-bound ledger. Ethan lifted it carefully, the cover cracking slightly under his fingers. The first page was written in a tight, old-fashioned script. Inventory of items received under arrangement with the Romanoff Trust. For safekeeping only. Do not disclose. Beneath it was a list of objects. Silver candlesticks, jeweled icons, a set of pearl-handled brushes, each with a date and a strange series of numbers beside them. At the bottom of the page, one entry stood out. Item 7, Imperial Egg Fabergé. Held in vault B until retrieval authorized. Ethan's breath caught. Fabergé egg? Like the ones made for Russian royalty? That couldn't be right. Those were museum pieces, worth millions. There was no way something like that had been sitting in this rotting theater for a century. But then he turned the page and froze. Tucked into the ledger was a faded sketch, drawn in precise, delicate lines. It showed an ornate egg, its surface studded with gems and intricate gold filigree. At its top, a small diamond-encrusted star twisted into the shape of a constellation. Scrawled beneath the drawing, in his uncle's unmistakable handwriting, were 3 words. Still down here. Ethan's heart pounded. He flipped through the rest of the ledger, searching for more clues, but the other pages were just inventories, shipping notices, and a few receipts for repairs. Nothing about where Vault B might be. A sudden noise made him jump, a sharp bang from upstairs, like a door slamming. Vince was still here, and he wasn't alone. Ethan shoved the ledger into his jacket pocket and turned off the flashlight again, plunging the room into darkness. He could hear voices now, muffled but angry, coming from the lobby. Told you, the place is worthless without the land. Vince snapped. You think I care about some broken-down stage? Another voice, calmer but with an edge. You're missing the point. The value isn't in the building. It's in what's under it. Ethan's blood ran cold. They knew. Somehow, Vince knew there was something hidden in the theater. And if he found Ethan down here with a ledger, a floorboard creaked directly overhead. They were coming this way. Ethan lunged to the door, easing it shut behind him just as a beam of flashlight cut through the darkness above. He didn't dare breathe as the footsteps moved closer, stopping right above the trapdoor. Check downstairs, the second voice said. Ethan's mind raced. There was no way out except back up the stairs, straight into them. Then his foot brushed against something on the floor, a loose piece of metal piping. He grabbed it, weighing it in his hand. He might not have a choice. A rumor of lost treasure. Ethan's fingers tightened around the metal pipe. The footsteps above him hesitated, then moved away, toward the stage. He let out a slow, silent breath. They hadn't found the trapdoor yet, but they would. He couldn't stay here. The basement had no other exits, and if Vince and his men came down, they'd find him crouched in the dark like a rat in a trap. He had to move. Ethan crept back up the stairs, pausing just beneath the trapdoor to listen. The voices were farther away now, arguing near the theater's main entrance. "Wasting time," Vince growled. "This place is falling apart. If there was anything valuable here, it's long gone." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," the other man replied, his voice low and measured. "This isn't just about money. It's about history. And some histories are worth more than gold." Ethan didn't recognize the second voice, but something about it sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't just some local thug Vince had hired. This man sounded like he knew things. He eased the trapdoor open just enough to peer out. The theater was dim, the only light filtering through cracks in the boarded-up windows. Vince stood near the lobby doors, arms crossed, his face twisted in irritation. Beside him was a tall, thin man in a long overcoat, his silver hair gleaming in the faint light. The man held a small old-fashioned lantern, its flickering glow casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan had never seen him before. He waited until their backs were turned, then slipped out of the trapdoor, pulling it shut silently behind him. He kept low, moving behind the rows of broken seats toward the side exit. Every creak of the floorboards made his heart lurch. He was halfway to the door when his foot caught on a loose floorboard, though it groaned under his weight. Vince's head snapped up. What was that? Ethan didn't wait. He bolted for the exit, shoving through the side door just as Vince shouted behind him. The cold night air hit his face as he sprinted down the alley, the ledger pressing against his ribs inside his jacket. He didn't stop running until he reached his tiny apartment above the laundromat. His hands shook as he locked the door behind him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. What the hell had he just stumbled into? The next morning, Ethan sat at the counter of Lou's Diner, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The ledger lay open in front of him, its brittle pages glowing under the fluorescent lights. He'd spent half the night poring over it, but the more he read, the less sense it made. Most of the entries were mundane. Shipment of lumber, payments for repairs, receipts for stage props. But every few pages, there was another mention of Item 7, the Fabergé egg. June 12, 1917. Item 7 transferred to Vault B, awaiting further instructions. October 3, 1917. Contact from Romanoff Trust delayed. Item 7 to remain in storage. And then, the last entry, dated December 1917. All communications ceased. Item 7 to be held indefinitely. Do not disclose location to anyone. Ethan rubbed his temples. None of this made sense. Why would a priceless Fabergé egg be hidden in a small-town theater in Ohio? And who was the Romanoff Trust? He pulled out his phone and typed Fabergé egg missing 1917 into the search bar. The results made his stomach drop. The Constellation egg, the first article read, one of the last imperial Fabergé eggs created for the Romanov family, 1917. Disappeared during the Russian Revolution. Current whereabouts unknown. Estimated value, $20 million. Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. $20 million. A shadow fell over the table. Interesting reading. Ethan slammed the ledger shut and looked up. The silver-haired man from the theater stood over him, his expression unreadable. Up close, he looked older, maybe in his 60s, with sharp, calculating eyes. "You must be Ethan Cole," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm Nikolai Sokolov." Ethan didn't take his hand. "How do you know my name?" Nikolai smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your uncle spoke of you. He was a good man. A careful man." He nodded at the ledger. "I see you found his records." Ethan's pulse spiked. "What do you want?" Nikolai leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The egg does not belong to you, Mr. Cole. It belongs to history. To Russia. Give it to me, and I will ensure you are compensated." Ethan's grip tightened on the ledger. "I don't have it." Nikolai's smile faded. "Then find it, before others do." He straightened, tossing a business card onto the table. "Time is running out." Then he was gone, leaving Ethan staring after him, the weight of the ledger heavy in his hands. Across the diner, Vince Kowalski watched from a booth. His phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah," he muttered. "He's got it." The hunt begins. The bell above the diner door jingled as Nikolai stepped out, leaving Ethan alone with the ledger, his coffee, and a growing sense of dread. His fingers traced the edges of the business card left behind. Nikolai Sokolov, historical artifacts consultant, with a New York address in sleek black lettering. Ethan exhaled sharply and flipped open the ledger again. He needed answers, and there was only one person in Brackenville who might know more about the theater's secrets than he did. Lena Petrov. She ran the town's tiny historical society out of a converted Victorian house on Maple Street. Rumor was she'd moved here from St. Petersburg years ago, chasing some family mystery of her own. The few times Ethan had seen her around town, she'd been brisk, no nonsense, the kind of person who didn't suffer fools, which meant she'd either laugh in his face or help him. Either way, he had to try. The Brackenville Historical Society was a creaky old house stuffed with filing cabinets, glass display cases of local artifacts, and the faint scent of old paper. Lena stood at a desk in the back, squinting at a faded map under a magnifying glass. She didn't look up when Ethan entered. If you're here to ask about the haunted mill story again, the answer is still no. It's a tourist trap. Ethan cleared his throat. Actually, I'm here about the Orpheum. That got her attention. Lena lifted her head, her sharp green eyes narrowing. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and a silver pendant shaped like a double-headed eagle resting against her collarbone. "Ethan Cole," she said, as if filing his name away in some mental catalog. "The janitor who inherited a ruin." "Yeah," he admitted, "and I think there's something hidden in it." He set the ledger on the desk between them. For a long moment, Lena didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached out and turned the first page. Her breath hitched when she saw the words Romanoff Trust. "Where did you get this?" "From a safe in the theater's basement," Ethan said. "There's an entry about a Fabergé egg, the constellation egg." Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the sketch. "This shouldn't exist," she whispered. "It was lost. Everyone assumed it was destroyed. You know about it?" She looked up, her expression unreadable. "My great-grandfather was a jeweler in St. Petersburg. He worked for Fabergé. When the revolution came, the imperial family smuggled out as many treasures as they could. Some made it to Europe. Others disappeared." Ethan leaned in. "You think the egg was brought here?" "It's possible," Lena said. Asterisk, the Orpheum's owner in 1917, Harrison Cole, your great-granduncle, had connections in Europe. There were stories, asterisk, she hesitated, stories he helped people escape, that he hid things for them. Ethan's mind raced. So the egg could still be there? "If it is," Lena said, snapping the ledger shut, "it's not just a treasure. It's a piece of history. And there are people who would kill for it." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "Like Nikolai Sokolov." Lena went very still. "You've met him?" "He found me at the diner. Knew about the ledger." "Then we don't have much time," Lena said, grabbing her coat. "Sokolov isn't just some collector. He's former KGB. He's been hunting lost Romanov artifacts for decades." Ethan stared at her. "How do you know that?" Lena's hand went to her pendant. "Because he's the reason I left Russia." Before Ethan could ask more, the front door burst open. Vince stood there, flanked by two men in work boots. His grin was all teeth. "Well, look at this. The janitor and the history nerd." He stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind him. "Hand over the ledger, Cole. This doesn't have to get ugly." Lena didn't flinch. "Get out." Vince laughed. "Or what? You'll throw a history book at me?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pistol. Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Last chance," Vince said. "The ledger. Now." Lena's hand slid toward a letter opener on the desk. Ethan made a split-second decision. He grabbed the ledger and threw it straight at Vince's face. As Vince stumbled back, Ethan lunged, tackling him into a display case. Glass shattered. The gun skidded across the floor. "Go!" Ethan shouted at Lena. She didn't hesitate. She snatched the ledger and bolted for the back door. Vince's men grabbed Ethan, yanking him off. Vince wiped blood from his lip, his eyes blazing. "You're dead, Cole." Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He kicked free, sprinting after Lena into the alley. The hunt for the egg had just turned into a race, and the stakes were higher than ever. The hidden blueprint. The alley behind the Historical Society was a maze of dumpsters and fire escapes, the perfect place to disappear. Ethan sprinted after Lena, his pulse roaring in his ears. Behind them, Vince's shouts echoed off the brick walls, followed by the heavy thud of boots giving chase. Lena moved like a shadow, darting left down a narrow passage between two buildings. Ethan barely kept up, his lungs burning. She suddenly yanked him into a recessed doorway, pressing a finger to her lips. They held their breath as Vince and his men ran past, their curses fading into the distance. Ethan exhaled sharply. "We can't stay here. They'll double back." Lena's grip on the ledger was white-knuckled. "We need somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look." A thought struck Ethan. "The high school?" Lena frowned. "The place you work? That's your plan. It's Saturday. The building's empty, and I still have my keys." He met her skeptical gaze. "Unless you've got a better idea?" She didn't. Brackenville High smelled of bleach and stale cafeteria food, the fluorescent lights humming ominously in the empty halls. Ethan led Lena to the janitor's closet, his domain for the past 15 years, and locked the door behind them. Lena wrinkled her nose at the mop buckets and industrial cleaners. "Charming. It's not the Ritz, but it's off the radar." Ethan grabbed a folding chair from the corner and set it down for her. "Now, let's see what we're really dealing with." Lena spread the ledger open on a supply shelf, flipping past the inventory list until she reached the sketch of the egg. Up close, the drawing was even more intricate. The constellation patterns etched into the gold, the tiny gemstones marking each star. "The constellation egg," she murmured. "Commissioned by Tsar Nicholas II for Empress Alexandra in 1917, one of the last Fabergé eggs ever made. It vanished during the Revolution, along with several others." Ethan leaned in. "And you think my great-granduncle hid in the Orpheum?" "It's possible." Lena turned a page, revealing a faded floor plan of the theater's lower levels. "Look, this isn't just a basement. There's a sublevel, a vault, and this symbol here." She pointed to a small mark near the stage. "It's Romanov cipher. My great-grandfather used it in his workshop ledgers." Ethan's mind raced. So the egg could still be there. If it is, it's not just sitting in a box. Lena tapped the blueprint. Fabergé pieces like this were often stored in custom compartments, sometimes even behind false walls. We'd need to find the exact spot marked here. Ethan studied the blueprint. The vault was accessible through a hatch beneath the stage, one he'd never noticed. If we're going back there, we need to move fast. Vince isn't the only one after this now. Lena's expression darkened. Sokolov is worse. He doesn't just want the egg. He wants to erase its history, make it disappear into some private collection. "You never told me how you know him." Lena hesitated, then lifted her pendant. "This was my great-grandfather's. It's the Romanov eagle. Sokolov's family hunted people like mine after the revolution. Anyone connected to the Tsar's court. He thinks these artifacts belong to him." A sudden bang echoed from the hallway. Someone was in the school. Ethan killed the lights. Through the slats of the closet door, he saw flashlight beams slicing through the dark. "Check every room," Vince's voice growled. "They're here somewhere." Lena's breath was shallow beside him. "We're trapped." Ethan's eyes darted to the ceiling, then to the small access panel above the shelves. The school's maintenance tunnels. "Not yet," he whispered. He hoisted Lena onto the shelves, then followed, quietly sliding the panel aside. The crawl space was tight and dusty, but it ran the length of the hallway. Below, a doorknob rattled. Ethan pulled the panel shut just as the closet door burst open. They crawled in silence, the only sound their ragged breathing and Vince's furious cursing fading behind them. 10 minutes later, they emerged through an exterior vent near the football field. The night air was crisp, the parking lot empty. Lena clutched the ledger to her chest. We can't keep running. We need to find that vault. Ethan nodded. Then let's go back to the Orpheum. Tonight, somewhere in the distance, a car engine roared to life. They were out of time. The false bottom. The Orpheum loomed before them. Its boarded-up windows like closed eyes, its crumbling facade a skeleton of what it once was. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Ethan's keys jingled in his shaking hands as he approached the side entrance, the one not visible from the street. Lena hovered close behind, her breath visible in the cold night air. "You're sure no one followed us?" Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. The lock gave way with a groan, and the door swung inward, releasing a gust of stale, damp air. The theater's interior was pitch black, the only light coming from the dim glow of Lena's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating floating dust and the sagging remains of velvet curtains. "The vault is under the stage," Ethan whispered, stepping carefully over broken floorboards. Lena nodded, her eyes scanning the blueprint one last time before tucking it into her coat. There should be a hatch, hidden under the trapdoor mechanism. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The stage creaked ominously as they climbed onto it, the wood groaning under their weight. Ethan knelt near the center, running his hands along the seams of the main trapdoor, the one he'd used years ago during high school plays. "Here," he muttered, finding a small, rusted latch near the edge. He pried it open, revealing a second, smaller door beneath. Lena sucked in a sharp breath. "That's it." The hatch opened with a screech of protest, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. The air from below was cold and smelled of wet earth and old metal. Ethan went first, the rungs creaking under his weight. The ladder led down into a cramped stone passage, barely wide enough to walk single file. The walls were lined with pipes, their surfaces slick with condensation. Lena's flashlight flickered as she joined him. "This isn't just a storage vault," she murmured. "It's a bunker." The passage ended at a heavy iron door, its surface streaked with rust. A large wheel, like something from a ship's hull, served as a handle. Ethan gripped it and turned, his muscles straining. For a heart-stopping moment, it didn't budge, then with a deafening groan, it gave way. The door swung open. Inside was a small, circular chamber, its domed ceiling lined with intricate tilework that might have once been beautiful but was now cracked and crumbling. In the center of the room sat a single wooden crate, its surface stamped with faded Cyrillic lettering. "This is it," Lena breathed, stepping forward. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as they approached the crate. It was smaller than he'd expected, no bigger than a shoebox. Lena ran her fingers over the markings, translating under her breath, "For safekeeping, until the Tsar returns." Ethan swallowed hard. "Open it." Lena pried the lid off with careful fingers. Inside, nestled in yellowed packing straw, was a tarnished silver egg. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lena lifted it, her brow furrowing. "This isn't right." Ethan leaned in. "What do you mean?" "It's too light. And look." She turned the egg in her hands, revealing a nearly invisible seam along its middle. With a sharp twist, it came apart in two pieces. "Empty." "A decoy," Lena whispered. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Then where's the real one?" A noise from above made them both freeze. Footsteps on the stage. Then Vince's voice, laughing. "You really think I know about the vault?" Ethan's blood ran cold. They were trapped. The flooded chamber. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness above, illuminating the open hatch. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as Vince's shadow loomed over the opening. "Did you really think I wouldn't follow you?" Vince's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. "You too are about as subtle as a bull in a china shop." Lena's fingers dug into Ethan's arm. "We need to move," she whispered urgently. Ethan scanned the vault desperately. The chamber had only one entrance, the way they'd come in, and Vince was blocking it. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed something he'd missed before, a narrow gap between the wall and one of the large pipes running along it. "There," he breathed, pulling Lena toward it. The space was tight, barely wide enough to squeeze through, but open into a secondary tunnel. one not marked on the blueprint. The air here was even damper, the walls slick with moisture. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily. Behind them, Vince cursed as he climbed down the ladder. "Find them!" he barked to someone above. The new tunnel sloped downward, the ceiling getting lower until they were forced to crouch. Ethan's shoulder brushed against a rusted valve, sending a metallic screech echoing through the passage. Both froze. For a terrifying moment, there was only silence. Then, "This way!" Vince's shout was followed by the pounding of boots. Ethan and Lena broke into a run, the tunnel twisting like a snake. The floor became uneven, then suddenly dropped into a shallow stream of icy water that soaked through their shoes. "Where does this lead?" Lena gasped. "No idea," Ethan admitted, pushing forward. The water rose to their ankles, then their calves. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber, some kind of old drainage system beneath the theater. The ceiling here was supported by rotting wooden beams, their surfaces fuzzy with mold. A splash behind them signaled Vince's men were closing in. Lena's flashlight flickered over the water, then caught on something along the far wall, a rusted metal door, half submerged. "Ethan, look!" They waded toward it, the water now up to their knees. The door was sealed shut with a heavy bolt, corroded with age. Ethan grabbed it, throwing his weight into pulling it free. It didn't budge. Together, Lena positioned herself beside him. On 3, they pulled with everything they had. With a shriek of protesting metal, the bolt tore loose. The door swung open, revealing a vertical shaft with rungs leading up. "Go!" Ethan urged Lena forward. She climbed swiftly, Ethan right behind her. Below, Vince's men burst into the chamber, their flashlight beams crisscrossing the rising water. "They're getting away!" One of the men raised a pistol. A gunshot rang out, the bullet pinging off the rung, just below Ethan's hand. He nearly lost his grip, but kept climbing, his muscles burning. The shaft led to another hatch. Lena slammed her shoulder against it once, twice. It burst open, cold night air rushing in. They tumbled out onto the alley pavement behind the theater, gasping. Ethan kicked the hatch shut behind them and grabbed a nearby dumpster, dragging it over the opening with a grunt of effort. "That won't hold them long," Lena panted. "Long enough." Ethan grabbed her hand. "We need to get off the streets." As they ran, a new realization settled over Ethan like a weight. The egg wasn't in the vault, which meant it was still hidden somewhere in the theater. And now Vince knew it too. The constellation revealed. Rain lashed against the windows of Lena's tiny apartment above the antique shop on Elm Street. Ethan paced the cramped living space, his damp shoes leaving prints on the worn hardwood. The adrenaline from their narrow escape still coursed through his veins, making his hands tremble slightly as he ran them through his hair. Lena emerged from the bathroom, towel drying her dark curls. She'd changed into dry clothes, an oversized sweater and jeans, and handed Ethan a bundle of fabric. "You'll catch pneumonia in those wet clothes." Ethan caught the sweatshirt she tossed at him. "Thanks." He peeled off his soaked jacket, wincing as a movement pulled at his sore muscles. The ledger, miraculously dry in its plastic bag, sat on the coffee table between them like a silent witness to their growing obsession. Lena knelt before an old trunk in the corner, rummaging through its contents. If the egg wasn't in the vault, then your uncle hid it somewhere else in the theater. She pulled out a yellowed envelope and turned to face him, but we're missing something. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward. "Like what?" Lena spread the contents of the envelope across the floor. Old photographs of the Orpheum in its heyday, playbills from the 1920s, and a single folded sheet of music. "These were my great-grandfathers." He worked backstage at the Orpheum for a short time after arriving in America. Ethan picked up one of the photographs. It showed a group of men in work clothes, standing before the theater's grand curtain. His breath caught when he recognized a younger version of his great-granduncle Harrison in the center. But it was a man beside him that made his pulse quicken, a tall figure with sharp features, holding what looked like a small, ornate box. "That's him," Lena whispered, pointing to the man. "Pyotr Ivanov, my great-grandfather." Ethan turned the photo over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink was a date, April 12, 1918, in a single line, for the performance that never was. Lena's fingers trembled as she unfolded the sheet music. This is what we've been missing. The title read The Constellation Waltz, composed for the Orpheum Grand Theater, but it was a handwritten note in the margin that made Ethan's heart stop. The stars will show the way when the curtain falls. Ethan and Lena locked eyes. "The stage," they said in unison. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time they crept back into the Orpheum through a broken basement window. The theater was silent except for the steady drip of water leaking through the roof. Ethan's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as they approached the stage. The grand curtain, now moth-eaten and gray with dust, hung motionless. Lena moved to the center of the stage and knelt, running her hands over the warped floorboards. "There's something beneath us." Ethan joined her, prying at the boards with his pocket knife. The wood groaned in protest before giving way, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a shoebox. Inside, wrapped in disintegrating velvet, was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen. The constellation egg gleamed even in the dim light, its gold surface inlaid with sapphires forming intricate celestial patterns. At its apex, a diamond-encrusted star twisted delicately, catching the light like a real star might catch the sun. Lena let out a choked sound, her hands hovering over it as if afraid it might vanish. "It's real," she breathed. Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing the cool metal. As he lifted it, something inside the egg shifted with a soft click. The top of the egg rotated smoothly, revealing a hidden mechanism. A tiny music box began to play, a delicate, haunting melody that Ethan recognized instantly. "It's the Constellation Waltz," Lena whispered. The moment shattered as the theater's doors burst open. Flashlight beams swept across the seats, illuminating Vince and his men. But it was the figure behind them that made Lena go rigid. Nikolai Sokolov, his silver hair gleaming in the dim light. "Ah," Nikolai said, his voice smooth as oil. "You've saved me the trouble of searching." Ethan's grip tightened on the egg as Nikolai stepped forward, a pistol glinting in his hand. "Now," he said, smiling coldly, "hand over what belongs to Russia." The curtain falls. The barrel of Nikolai's pistol gleamed under the Orpheum's flickering emergency lights. Ethan's fingers tightened around the constellation egg, its cool metal pressing into his palm. Behind Nikolai, Vince and his men fanned out across the theater, blocking every exit. Lena edged closer to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't give it to him. If that egg leaves this country—" "Quiet," Nikolai snapped, his cultured accent cracking like thin ice. "You think this is about money? That egg belongs in a Russian museum. It is our heritage." Ethan scoffed. "Funny way of showing it, pointing a gun at us." Nikolai's smile didn't reach his cold eyes. "You Americans never understand. Some things are worth more than lives." A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan risked a glance over his shoulder. One of Vince's men was circling around the stage wings, a tire iron in his hands. They were surrounded. Lena's fingers brushed against Ethan's wrist, then tapped 3 times. A signal. "Okay," Ethan said suddenly, raising the egg. "You win. Catch." He threw it, not to Nikolai, but high into the air toward the theater's crumbling ceiling. Everything happened at once. Nikolai shouted in Russian, lunging forward. Vince's men scrambled, arms outstretched. The egg arced through the dusty air, sunlight from a broken window, catching its sapphires in a dazzling blue flash. Lena moved like lightning. She grabbed Ethan's arm and yanked him toward the stage's trapdoor, the same one they'd used earlier. They tumbled through just as a gunshot rang out, splintering the wood where Ethan's head had been. The drop was farther than Ethan remembered. He hit the basement floor hard, pain shooting up his ankles. Lena landed beside him with a grunt, already scrambling to her feet. Above them, chaos erupted, shouting more gunshots, the sound of splintering wood. "They'll be on us in seconds." Ethan gasped, limping toward the narrow tunnel they'd used before. "Wait!" Lena skidded to a stop, staring at the debris around them. Her eyes locked onto a rusted metal lever near the wall, one Ethan hadn't noticed before. "Help me with this." They pulled together. With a shriek of protesting metal, The lever gave way. Somewhere above, a great mechanical groan echoed through the theater, followed by a thunderous crash. Dust rained from the ceiling as the entire stage curtain assembly collapsed inward, burying the hatch they'd just come through. What was that? Ethan coughed. Lena grinned fiercely. Asterisk 1918 safety mechanism. My great-grandfather helped install it. Asterisk. Distant shouts and cursing filtered through the debris. They bought themselves time, but not much. Ethan patted his jacket pocket and froze. The egg. Here. Lena opened her hand, revealing the glittering treasure. Sleight of hand. You threw a stage prop. Ethan stared at her, then burst into incredulous laughter. You're amazing. I know. Lena's smile faded. But we're not safe yet. Nikolai won't stop. A new sound cut through the basement. Sirens, growing louder. Police? Ethan frowned. Better. Lena pulled out her phone, showing him a sent text. Found it. Orpheum. Bring cameras. New York Times Antiquities reporter. Friend of mine. Ethan shook his head in wonder as they hurried through the tunnels. You planned this? Planned? No. Lena ducked under a low pipe. Hoped? Absolutely. They emerged through a storm drain 2 blocks away, just as police cars screeched to a halt outside the Orpheum. Through the broken windows, they could see Nikolai arguing with officers, Vince trying to slip away into a crowd of reporters suddenly swarming the scene. Lena tucked the egg safely into a padded bag inside her coat. Now we make sure the world knows what we found. Ethan looked back at the crumbling theater, his theater, and for the first time saw not a ruin, but a story waiting to be told. Where to now? He asked. Lena took his hand. Somewhere with very good security. A stage reborn. 1 year later, Ethan Cole stood center stage at the newly restored Orpheum Grand Theater. The scent of fresh paint and polish were filling the air. The once crumbling ceiling now gleamed with restored gilded arches, and the velvet seats below sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Every detail had been painstakingly brought back to life, just as he'd promised. The packed audience erupted into applause as the curtain rose, revealing Ethan in a simple suit rather than his old janitor's uniform. At his side stood Lena Petrov, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, the familiar Romanov eagle pendant gleaming at her throat. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. Welcome to grand reopening of the Orpheum and to the first exhibition of the Constellation Collection. A spotlight shifted to illuminate the glass display case beside them. Inside, the Constellation egg rested on a bed of midnight blue velvet, its sapphires catching the light like real stars. The small plaque beneath it read, On permanent loan from a Russian people, in memory of those who preserve beauty in dark times. The applause grew louder. Camera flashes popped throughout the theater as reporters documented the moment. In the front row, the New York Times journalist who'd broken the story smiled approvingly. Lena stepped forward. This egg survived revolution, war, and a century in hiding because ordinary people chose to protect it, she said, her voice carrying to the silent theater. My great-grandfather, Ethan's uncle, and now us. Ethan's gaze drifted to the side wings, where Vince Kowalski, now wearing a contractor's badge, gave him a grudging nod. After the police investigation and media storm, Vince had struck a deal to avoid jail time by helping fund the theater's restoration. Somewhere in the shadows, Nikolai Sokolov watched too, his expression unreadable. The Russian government had granted him immunity in exchange for returning several other stolen artifacts, but the Constellation egg would remain in America, where the world could see it. As the crowd began touring the exhibition, Ethan lingered on stage, running his hand along the smooth wood of proscenium, the same spot where he'd found the egg a year ago. Lena joined him, slipping her hand into his. Your uncle will be proud. Ethan smiled. He always said this place was special. He looked out over the buzzing crowd, the reporters, the curious townspeople who'd once mocked him. Now everyone knows why. A young girl tugged her mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at the egg. Mommy, it's like a fairy tale. Ethan crouched to her level. The best part, he lowered his voice conspiratorially. There's still missing treasures out there. Maybe even in your own town. The girl's eyes widened with wonder, just as Ethan's had a year ago in that dusty basement. Did this story inspire you? Like and subscribe for more real-life treasure hunts and forgotten histories. Comment below, what would you do if you found something priceless in your hometown?